Hello, I'm the Dark Master. Welcome back to the Tale of the Trilobites. In the last two videos on this series, I've discussed what exactly a trilobite is, where they fit in the family tree, and discussed their anatomy in such a manner that is easy to understand. So check those out if you want to learn more on those specific subjects. This time, however, we shall be starting the coverage of the 11 orders of trilobites, discussing their place in trilobite evolution, their diversity, classification, ecology, and what may have happened to them. And of those 11 orders, we shall be starting with the Redlichida, the first of the trilobites. But what exactly were the first trilobites? That's kind of an interesting question that we're going to answer now. So exactly what the first trilobite was is actually somewhat hard to decipher for several reasons. First, the further back you go, the poorer the fossil record is. There's just not as many deposits of Cambrian age compared to, say, the Cretaceous or the Eocene. Secondly, many early trilobites had comparatively weakly mineralized exoskeletons, at least compared to later forms, as well as the fact that paleontologists have issue synchronizing various Cambrian deposits to properly establish their age. So poorly known are they that the Cambrian stages 2, 3, 4, and 10 don't have formal names, which is very unfortunate. With that being said, though, the oldest trilobite genus that we currently know of is Olenellid-like, which is known from rocks that are 521 million years old. However, while this is the oldest trilobite that we know of, and indeed the Redlichiida do represent the basal condition that trilobites were in and are the group from which all other orders derive from, this individual genus is probably not actually the oldest trilobite, or the first one to exist. Indeed, Pictocoparda, Agnostic, and Redlichida all appear in rocks that are a million or less years later, being widely distributed, with highly different bodies that imply that the actual first trilobite has yet to be found and likely originates sometime towards the beginning of the Cambrian. But with that being said, the first trilobite was no doubt a Redlichida, and they definitely represent, what the first trilobite looked like in broad strokes. Speaking of that, now let us discuss the traits that are diagnostic to this group, aka are what scientists use to distinguish it from the other orders. The Redlichids are primitive in many regards. Unlike later trilobites, they often had numerous thoracic body segments, far larger in number than others, and couldn't really roll up nearly as well as more derived groups could. To make up for this, most had modified segments that bore long axial spines. Unlike those of later trilobites, these grow out of a thoracic segment instead of the pygidium or tail. They also have more flattened exoskeletons and tend to have large eyes and very small pygidiums or tail segments. Of course, these are generalities, and as is true for pretty much all orders, even with these diagnostic traits listed, there are exceptions to these rules, but these are just the general traits that you can look out for if you want to identify this trilobite. As stated, these generalities, of course, will have exceptions, and if you find a specimen that you can't identify, take it to your local museum and they can help you out. Now that we've discussed these diagnostic traits, let us go on to the internal taxonomy within the Redlichida. So the Redlichiida are divided into two suborders, the Olenellioidea and the Redlichida. These two are distinguished by whether they, in the case of Olenellioidea, lack facial sutures or possess them in the case of Redlichida. The lack of these traits is believed to be the basal condition, which makes sense as the Olenellina are the older of the two suborders. They wouldn't have all the refinements of later groups, given, their position. This suborder is itself divided into four superfamilies: the Phallotaspidoidea, the Nevadidoidea, the Judomyoidea, and the Olenelloidea, which are the superfamily that gave the suborder's name. Starting with the Phallotaspidoidea, these were for a long time considered the oldest of the trilobites. In addition to several stem genera like Phytolienas, the superfamily was divided into three families: the Dagunspida, which in addition to containing a Prophallotespis, one of the oldest trilobites dating back to 520 million years old, it also held interesting genera like Dagunaspis and Pelmonoaspis. Then there is the Archaeaspidae, which is a monotypic family containing the single genus Archaeaspis, notable for the elongated spine on the third thoracic segment. The Phallotaspididae contains the genus Phallotaspis, which gave the superfamily the name. The second superfamily, the Nevadioideae, mostly consists of a group of genera formerly included within the Phallotaspidoidea, which are distinguished by long frontal glabellar lobes and prominent eye ridges. They're honestly a bit forgettable, but the genus Geraldianella is neat, and the genus Kleptothule was a very unusual one, resembling more a millipede than a typical trilobite, and it's known from Greenland. The same could be said of the superfamily Judomyoidea, which is mostly forgettable outside of the genus Calavia, known from Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Massachusetts. The fourth and final superfamily of the Olenellina, and one of the last of the order to exist, are the Olenelloidea, which are distinguished by features of the glabella that are frankly too obscure and technical to really get into in a way that is, understandable, frankly, and kind of boring. That being said, though, outside of a few stem genera like Wineria and Momaspis, this superfamily is divided into three families. First are the Biceratopsidae, which are small to average sized trilobites named after their most famous genre, Biceratops, with its Triceratops-styled spines. They are known primarily from Laurasia, which eventually became North America and Asia. They are themselves divided into two subfamilies. First is the Biceratopsinae, which, in addition to the genus Biceratops, also contained the notable genus Olenelloides, which was notable for its very fierce-looking hexagonal-shaped head with three pairs of spines that are believed to have developed via paedomorphosis, which, no, is not something you'll find in Vosh's porn folder, but rather a process in which baby characteristics are maintained into adulthood, for various reasons. The second subfamily, the Bristolinae, are much smaller in number, have effaced heads, and are most well known for the genus of Bristolia. The other two are sadly far less appreciated or well known. The second family of the Olenellioidea are the Holmidae, which contained 8 genera distinguished by the straight-sided glabella, whose most notable genus was Campropalus, known for what is now Morocco. Last but not least is the Olenellidae, which was itself divided into two subfamilies, the Mesonaxinidae, most notable for their rather narrow bodies seen in the genus Mesonachis, and the second subfamily, the Olenellina, which includes the genus Olenellus itself, that gave the suborder its name, contained 7 species with some rather fascinating etymology that, frankly, an entire video could be made about this one genus. And I will return to it likely later when we go into the ecology of the order, but for now, let's go on to the second suborder of the Redlichiida, the Redlichina. This second suborder is distinguished from the previous one by the presence of suture lines that may have allowed them to shed their exoskeleton more easily. It is itself divided into 3 superfamilies: the Emueloidea, the Paradoxoidea, and the Redlichoidea. The Eumueloidea was the smallest of the 3 superfamilies, known only from the rocks of the southern Australian area and Antarctica. They were divided into 2 families, the Eumelidae, which contained 2 genera, the most notable one being Balcoracania, which has the greatest number of segments in any trilobite, having more than 100 in total, though admittedly one species only had 97, which is still a large number of segments. The second family, the Megaphranoaspididae, only has a single genus, Megaphranoaspis, which was a tiny species, only half an inch long. The second superfamily, the Paradoxoidea, is slightly more diverse, containing 3 families. The Zistriduridae, which is commonly found in Queensland, Australia, has really only one notable genus, which gave the group its name. Then there was the Centropluridae, which included the genus Centroplura and Bichonella. But most notable of the 3 families was Paradoxididae itself, which included a dozen genera, the most notable of which was Paradoxides and Acatoparadoxes, which was one of the largest trilobite species of all time, reaching 17.7 inches long, only being beaten in overall size by a few other genera that we'll discuss when we get to those orders. The third and final superfamily of the Redlichina is also the largest, that being Redlichoideae. It contains a whopping 11 families. First is the Redlichidae, which itself was further divided into 5 subfamilies. First is the Redlichinae, which contains the genus Redlichia, which was a rather large genus at up to 14 inches and rather common, being found throughout the world, including China, Antarctica, Spain, Iran, and many other places in Eurasia. It gave the name to the subfamily, family, superfamily, suborder, and the order Redlichida itself, so clearly it's very important for the understanding of early trilobites. The next subfamily, the Para-Redlichinae, are notable for containing the genus Lamidadelea, which is the oldest currently known trilobite genus that I discussed earlier. Then there are the Wutingospinae, notable for the genus Chinjangaspis. As you can tell, they're mostly from China, which is why they have these really hard names to pronounce. Then there are the Neo-Redlichinae, which contains 4 genera of trilobites that are honestly very similar to Redlichia itself. And lastly, we got the Meta-Redlichinae, which are another group of very similar looking trilobites. The next family, the Gigantopygidae, are much smaller, only containing a single genus, Gigantopygius. The same is true for the family Menoaspidae, which contains a single genus, Menoraspis. The next family, Abadrelidae, contains 5 genera found in Eurasia, with the most notable genus being Abadiella itself. The family Chencoaspidae contains 9 genera or so, the most interesting one being Belliceps. Then we have the generally wider, more robust family known as the Dolerolenidae, which contains four genera, the most notable being Dolerolenus itself. That is quite robust. Then there is the small family Cuichoidae, which contains two genera, neither of which are particularly well documented, and I can't really find any images of them at all. The same could be said for the Mayelidae, which is again a rather small family containing three genera which have no images on the internet, which is not good. The next family, the Metadoxididae, contains nine genera, the most notable being Hongxiangyaspis. Then there is the family Sauciadidae, which contains 14 genera, the most notable one being Perector and Nesujolcia. The final family is the Yamitidae, which contained a little over a dozen genera, the most well-known one being Drepororoides. One last group that I think is worth mentioning are the Bathynotidae, best represented by the genus Bathonotus. They are a contentious family of trilobites, as they display a strange mixture of traits. They have the general body plan of that seen in the Redlichida. They have some ventral morphology and facial structures that are more in line with that of the trilobite orders Pictoparidae and Corynexochidae, and a completely unique head morphology seen in no other trilobite group. While they are maybe not technically Redlichidids according to some sources, I do think that this family is worth discussing, and this weird gray area will become later relevant in a future chapter's video, so pay attention. But now, let us go on to the ecology of these most ancient of trilobites. Alright, so before I discuss the ecology of the Redlichida and other orders in future videos, I want to stress the fact that trilobites are very diverse, and it can be hard to say anything solid for the group as a whole, as when it comes to a lot of these fossils, we don't actually fully know a lot of the ecology of a lot of these species. As such, when it comes to discussing the ecology of the Redlichidids and other trilobites going forward, I will be mostly focusing on the ecologies of those that we know much about. Keep in mind, these are generalizations and likely do not apply to all Redlichidids, as many social, behaviors leave absolutely no trace in the fossil record. As such, we can only speculate as to what they may have been like. Despite the common assumption of trilobites as food for other larger creatures like Anomalocaris or, in later groups, cephalopods and jawed fish, many trilobites, especially the large genus Paradoxoides and Olenelloides, were actually relatively active predators, as they had an inflated glabella, which implies that they had a large feeding chamber and would have likely fed upon smaller animals such as worms, echinoderms, and brachiopods, as we see some genuses like Bristolia being, preserved alongside brachiopods, and, even smaller trilobites like agnostids would often be fed upon these. And from what we can tell, they were found at various depths and were rather successful for a time. In fact, they are so successful and very numerous that they're very important in understanding specific time periods, and their appearance marks the beginning of a certain time period in the Cambrian, and their disappearance, marks the beginning of the Middle Cambrian. Now that we've discussed their ecology, let us conclude this video by covering what exactly happened to these oldest of trilobites and why they are important. The Redlichida's status compared to other trilobites is actually a bit controversial, as I mentioned when discussing the Bathonotidae. This is due to the age and basal nature of the order. It can be hard to tell where these guys end and later trilobite orders begin, leading to a good deal of controversy to the common overlap between the last of the Redlichidids and the earliest of the Corynexochidids and Phytocorporidae, which shall be the next order I cover in this video series. In fact, some argue that it's not even really an order itself and rather an evolutionary grade, but I think those people take it a bit far. It's just a little messy due to the age of these groups, and I do think that they are still orders in their own right. As for the Redlichidas themselves, sadly, despite this initial success during the early Cambrian, they went extinct rather soon after, during the start of the Middle Cambrian, about 500 million years ago, only lasting at most, at least according to the fossil record, 21 million years, before being replaced by more derived trilobite groups. The reason for this is hard to ever know for certain, and while I definitely don't want to imply that some groups are better than others, there's actually quite a number of reasons why this likely happened. First, there was the evolution of more efficient predators, and the inability of these long-bodied animals to effectively roll up in comparison to later trilobites. That, combined with a weaker, less mineralized exoskeleton, as well as the presence of more derived trilobites putting pressure on them, likely led to their early demise. Despite this, the Redlichida are actually very important, and if it wasn't for them, all the future trilobite orders would never exist. So really, you could make the argument that they never really went extinct in the first place, and rather just morphed into future groups, but that gets into the question of how we define orders, and that's too high concept for this video. And I hope that I've given some appreciation to you guys on the importance of the Redlichidids. I'm the Dark Master, and if you liked this video, liked it, but if you loved it, consider liking and subscribing, and join me next time on the Tale of the Trilobites, where we shall be going into the next oldest order of trilobites, the Phycopauridae.
Sorry, man, for feeling the way I do. Oh yeah, open wide and they'll shove in the meaning of life. Oh yeah.